Planning Commission,
Recording in progress.
actually, Planning Commission and Zoning Board joint workshop session tonight, filtered within the Planning Commission boundaries here. Before we roll forward, I'd like to just request the Planning Commission approve an amendment to the minutes by striking item 4, which is approval of minutes from February 8th. I'd like to move those to the next regular Planning Commission meeting.
Is that a motion or a suggestion?
I guess since in the way we've been doing this, I'll make that a motion.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion to remove the minutes of February 8th for the Planning Commission members. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and just for the record, our alternate commissioner, Paula, is a voting member tonight. It appears.
The vote was,
And we're missing
I don't see Daniel.
Daniel. Okay.
6-0.
He was supposed to be here, so if he shows up,
So if he shows up,
Then-
Paula will, in a voting situation, you'll be backed off, but this is a workshop, so you'll be able to participate. Okay, so motion carries, we got 7, 3 and 4, 7-0.
do we have Daniel?
No, we have Trevor,
but Paul,
Josh.
All right. 7.
Good? All those, yeah. All those in favor?
We already did that.
We did that already? Okay, so item 4 is removed from the motion, from the minutes. Whew. Next item is public comment. Does anyone want to offer comments to the Planning Commission or ZBA tonight, since you're here, for any item that's not on the agenda? See no hands. I'm not in the meeting tonight, so I'm looking for you guys to monitor the online,
Why are you not in the meeting?
because I didn't get to it. No, I'm not in the meeting electronically.
She's not online.
I normally watch for hands and stuff online at the same time.
Oh.
Okay, hearing none. I'd like to move on, and for this workshop, which would be for the Planning Commission and the ZBA members to discuss our transition that's coming up, I'd like to ask Catherine to manage this workshop from start to finish.
great.
Try to wrangle us in.
All right, I'll do my best. I thought it might be good to start out with introductions. I don't know if we all know each other. So I guess I can start. I think everyone knows me, but Catherine Sonic, I'm the Community Development Director.
I'm Paula Duke. I'm an alternate on the Planning Commission.
I'm Georgia Levine, and I'm fairly new to the Planning Commission.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
10 months, something like that. Feels new.
I'm John Schumacher. Everybody knows me as Shu, and I'm on the Planning Commission.
I'm Dustin Brusso. I'm on the Planning Commission. Been for
Ever?
ever.
I'm Nick Martin. I'm with the ZBA.
I'm Hubie Norton. I'm on the zoning board. I've been here forever.
Sharon Kelly, zoning administrator.
Kent Johnson, the town planner.
And I haven't been on the Planning Commission very long, but I've been attending the meetings for almost 10 years.
We have a couple guys online.
Yep.
3, actually.
Joshua Knox, Vice Chair, Planning Commission. Been here for about, I guess, 11 years now.
I'm John Mangan on the Planning Commission. I believe 5 years. I've kind of lost track.
And Trevor.
Been here since.
Yes, I'm on both the planning and zoning boards, and for about a year.
It's pretty low. Is there any way?
Oh, it's just on the
On there.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Well, I'm.
What did he say?
Trevor Williams. He's been on.
Trevor, can you
he's
give
on
us a
both
sound
the
check?
Commission and the zoning board.
Say hi again.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we hear you.
Barely.
Barely.
We're good for now. Okay.
All right. So tonight is sort of I'd say, kickoff meeting to talk about the transitioning and final landing point of having a DRB, which is going to be happening by January 1st of 2025. And I've been doing some research, just trying to figure out how to make the transition, what we kind of want our ending product to be. A few weeks ago, Dustin and Nick and Sharon and I met together just to do some initial brainstorming with both boards and staff, just to think about what we're going to do. And this is where the idea came for having this joint meeting. I'll just tell you, or my hope at the outcome of this meeting would be that we don't have to have everything ironed out, but we have at least an idea of the direction we're headed, and be able to present this to the select board sooner rather than later. And the thought is just to make sure they're on the same page, that we're all on. So if we wait to do that, say until July, then we've done planning that they might not agree with, and it doesn't make sense. So like the earlier the better. I think March 18th is the best select board meeting to do that, or it's been suggested. So it doesn't really give us a lot of time. But hopefully we can have a super productive meeting tonight and have a good idea of where we're heading. All right, so there was some material that I provided for you all, really without much explanation. But I did some research to look at what state statute says about what a planning commission is, what a DRB is. Looked at did a sort of survey of different towns, and to see how many DRB members, how many PC members, and then how many meetings that they have per month. And then with some notes, particularly looking at if there's overlap between the two different boards. Kind of runs the gamut in, between once a month, twice a month, that kind of thing. I would say for DRB members, it's between 5 and 7 with 1 or 2 alternates. PC, mostly 7, but there's a high of 9 for Danville and Heinsberg. Colchester has a youth member on both boards, which is kind of interesting. I don't think there's any statute that supports that, and they could be more of a sort of an advisory member, like if we chose to do something like that. And there does not seem to be a whole lot of overlap between the boards, or having a member on both boards. And my thought on that is that it's just a big time commitment to be on both boards, more than that. I didn't see anywhere where towns said you can't be on both. There might be towns that do have that, but I didn't see that. So also, I included rules of procedure for Charlotte for both their DRB and their planning commission. And I thought those were well written, and they're really based on some examples that VLCT has provided. I guess Essex Junction most recently made the switch to a DRB. And then Charlotte did in 2021, I believe. So pretty recent for them. I spoke both with staff in both of those towns just to get some idea from them if they had any advice, any thoughts, any words of wisdom.
Warnings.
And they did. Actually, Sharon was with me when we spoke to Regina Mahoney here in the city. And it looks like Daniel is here now, which is fine. We're not doing any voting tonight. Anyway. So I would say sort of their words of wisdom mostly would be that they thought it was a really good idea to have some PC members be on the DRB. And it doesn't mean necessarily that a current PC member has to be on both boards, but to at least to carry over onto the DRB and have some zoning board members stay on the zoning board. But they could go to the other board too. But also, I think in
What do you mean stay? Aren't we eliminating the zoning board? Isn't that kind
I'm sorry, stay in their, go to the DRB, but like in their same sort of, they do the same sort of thing
Yeah.
that a DRB would do. So I'm sorry, that was
They're wearing the same outfit, they're just.
right.
Continue their term.
Well, yeah.
Maybe.
So yeah, I'll get to some suggestions, like some recommendations of how to what I would say might be a good way to make our transition.
Yeah.
But in Charlotte, the planner there did say that he really liked having a member be on both boards, so that one person would be on the planning commission and the DRB. Thought it was really good for communication, good for even sharing expertise of things that they're doing and learning. And so I know we have some differing opinions about that, and just sharing what I've heard essentially.
Currently, we have Trevor who's
I know
acting
we
as
do.
both,
We already have someone. Yeah, right.
who volunteered their time. So
Good
thank
point.
you, Trevor.
Good point. One of the things in Essex Junction they said is that there are a lot of new members on the DRB, and so I think they've kind of had a little bit of a looser way that they do business in the past on the PC even. So they thought it would be, or they saw it important having a script of here's how we run our meetings, making sure that everyone understands how the meetings are run, both the DRB members, but also the public. Also, when I was in Jericho, the DRB always had an interested person's sort of script that the chair ran through at the beginning, just to kind of lay out, here's how the meeting runs, here's this is who an interested person is. So that was something that worked well for Jericho, also Essex Junction. Yeah, I think that was most of it. So I have a little PowerPoint presentation that I thought would be hopefully helpful in helping us just kind of jump off and start.
Quick question, Catherine.
Yeah.
In the VLCT document that you sent us, there's a note that says DRBs are authorized to have alternates. Planning commissions are not.
Right.
How did somebody get an alternate? One of the planning
Yeah,
commissions
I think
says-
Williston has an alternate. They shouldn't have an alternate.
Okay, just thought that was a little odd. I saw the chart and
Yep.
What?
So currently our planning commission can have an alternate because it's a quasi judicial function, or part of what you do. The planning commission is quasi judicial. When that role goes away for the planning commission, then the planning commission is not allowed to have an alternate. The DRB can have it.
Oh, I'm sorry, the new planning commission.
The new planning
Okay.
commission.
Okay, yes, because they're not making judgments, they're
Right.
planning,
Right. Exactly.
making recommendations.
Right. So here is, well, also adopting plans and regulations and stuff too, but they're not acting. Well, here's a little, just a summary of how it works or can work. So we have our legislative body, which is the select board, and then we have an administrative side, in particular where we're talking about here with administering zoning regulation is the zoning administrator. So that would be Sharon in this case, where she's doing zoning permits and answering questions, making decisions about, statute allows a zoning administrator certain level, or staff really, certain level of ability to make decisions. But then we also have a legislative side, which is the planning commission. And that is really, back to what I was just saying. So the planning commission works on zoning amendments, works on the town plan, can work on the capital plan, any sort of long range or short range plan. And then you have the quasi judicial side. Better that time? Hopefully it's the last time I have to say that.
say what?
Nope. So you have two models, and the current one that we have is on the right on the screen, and so that's the Zoning Board of Adjustment and a Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission currently does site plan and subdivision review, PUD review, and the Zoning Board of Adjustment does conditional uses, variances, appeals, unspecified use. So what happens if you have a DRB is that the planning commission and the zoning board go away. In this case, the development review does all of that development review that was done by two boards. And so that makes sense. That's and so we cannot have a DRB and a zoning board at the same time either. So when the development review board DRB comes into being, the zoning board disappears. That's a requirement of state statute. Okay, so here are some of the issues that we thought of that we need to focus on. So we need to determine the membership of the boards.
That's a question right up front. First of all, the charter amendments have been all approved and so on. We're good to go with that?
Yes.
Okay. Secondly, in the charter, was there mention about numbers of members for each board or not?
I don't think so.
I think it was only what other communities had.
I don't think it talked about them.
Yeah,
That is a good question, Hubie. But I don't think it had numbers.
Okay. Just,
Yeah, but that would be, we'd be locked in.
well, yeah, I guess
For
that,
sure.
I was curious. Anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, excuse me.
I will look into that. So we also need to think about,
Wait a minute, wasn't there something in there somewhere about up to 9?
maybe
Well,
use that
that's,
language
we've got language.
with state
The
statute.
state statute says you can have this to this.
Yep, a range, right. So, I had mentioned my discussion with Essex Junction and Charlotte about this institutional knowledge and expertise. And so especially at the beginning, when you have a new board like the DRB being formed, really it was recommended to make sure that there's people on the DRB that have experience doing development review and then also experience understanding the zoning regulations. So, which would mean, let's say, having at least a planning commissioner make the switch over to the DRB, at least one. Hopefully the ZBA having some members join on either board too. And the Regional Planning Commission had the suggestion of trying to have some overlap. So not a large number, having one member maybe be on both boards. You could have a DRB member who's an alternate be on the Planning Commission maybe. So there is overlap or full membership either way. I see an issue of potentially just the time commitment of if you're going to be on both boards, that's just more meetings for somebody. That might be too much. So.
We've got the same number of staff.
Right.
And
that's
my next.
Okay.
And I would just, my point on having somebody sit on the board, a planning commission member, it's easy to make rules, but then when you have to apply them, it's sometimes not what you expected when you created such a regulation. Good experience to be able to bring that to the DRB.
So number of meetings a month. That is, I think, a big issue with staffing levels in my mind. And that is a thing I heard also from the other towns. So, right now, the three of us are here at this planning commission meeting. Sharon does the zoning board, but the zoning board doesn't meet very often.
No.
And so if we say we're to have 2 planning commission meetings a month, like we currently do, except really now one is planning and one is development review, that's a lot of meetings for, I would say, especially Kent, because he would be the main person doing the development review board application. So
given the volume that we currently are putting through, is there at least, I'm envisioning this as be a recommendation to the select board, but it doesn't have to be the final recommendation. It doesn't have to be the final vision. It could be a phased approach.
Yep.
To minimize the disruption all the way around, we could almost suggest 1 meeting for planning, 1 meeting for development review
Per month.
per month.
kind of the way it's working.
Basically, the way, I mean, you guys aren't having frequent meetings right now.
Not lately.
Not right now, no.
And
Comes in
if,
spurts.
but if you're gonna be looking at the same things, if everybody's gonna be looking at the one batch of stuff, maybe for the initial rollout, we don't change the cadence.
Mhm.
Staff won't be affected. Realistically, they won't be drastically affected. Your focus will be different, but
Are you,
yeah, I'm just rambling.
You can look to me to,
January 15th.
he's not running the meeting.
She's running the meeting, so
Oh, it's gonna let you know.
It's a Paula talk person.
I've lost my train of thought. What about the the new planning commission?
Mhm.
Do those in other towns tend to meet twice a month, or do they tend to meet once a month?
Yeah, it varies per town. So it's like
If I may,
two here.
Daniel?
I'm sorry I was late and I'm on Zoom. Had to take care of the child, but about monthly meetings and stuff. If I understand it, with the planning commission being converted to a long-term process, I would agree that probably once a month would be enough for that planning commission to make consistent progress. And if more meetings are necessary, that could be determined, right? But with the DRB, I think the DRB ought to still have 2 a month. And I know that's just pushing more meetings and more time, but I also am of the understanding that there's just a lot more work on the DRB at a consistent pace, right? And so if you keep it at 2 meetings a month, maybe they're shorter meetings, and folks that are trying to get development done can do so without waiting such lengths in between.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are valid points. I think since I've been here, like about a year and a half, I don't feel like there's been a whole lot of backup of development review. So once a month might be okay. If things, say we make some changes with the ETC next plan, we're increasing zoning, a lot of activity happens, there might be a need to increase to 2. I've spoken a little bit with Greg about, maybe there comes a point where we need another staff member where that person is just doing development review. That's true in other towns, so like Williston, South Burlington, definitely Burlington, Colchester. So that's something to think about.
I would hope that the select board considers, if anything, rather than going to 2 immediately, do a trial for 1 year. Just allow us to
Or even
see
6 months or something.
something.
Yeah, right.
But
Yep.
6 months is a blink of the eye
Yep.
with the statutory requirements of how it has to get the application in, when you have to warn it, when there's a lot of other things behind the scenes that is involved. And I think right now, if staff isn't changing, I think 1 and 1. And I support, you're right, it goes in spurts. Even though our applications have not been, a lot of them, they've been complicated and they've taken a lot of time. Staff time. So that's my 2 cents.
I fear that a 6-month period might be a bit too short because
Yes.
wintertime
Yeah.
it dies off completely. Summertime is when they get ramped up and we have higher numbers of applicants.
Of course, if you had more than you can handle in one meeting, you can always continue the meeting to another day.
But you have
Good
to have,
time and place.
You have to have the staff reports and stuff ready for the meeting. So
Yeah,
you can't.
no, what I'm saying is, okay, say you have 5 applications and they're all warned to be at the same time, same day, you get through 3 of them. You got 2 left. Okay, so you continue the meeting to a time and place. So all of the paperwork has been there, okay? So you just continue the meeting to, as is allowed, a time and place. So, it might be the next day, it might be a week away, but so you could handle an overload that way.
And meetings could be a little bit longer for the
Right.
DRB than
Well,
we see
that-
sometimes.
Dusty can attest. I mean, we've had meetings 10:30, 11:30, midnight. But I guess I'm still not following a little bit, Hubie.
No, I'm right on with him. Because when we get to a meeting, the paperwork's done. By the time it shows up in the desk, what you're talking about is what we have on an agenda. It could be 10 applications. If we get through 5, we can continue that meeting and schedule another meeting,
Continue the public hearing.
continue the public hearing to the next day, to the next week. I think the point, if I may, that I suggested originally is that part of our recommendation to the select board to begin with is do a phased approach to this. And I like the idea of doing a year, maintaining 1 per month, with the understanding that if the workload ramps up, we either do special meetings or we change the cadence. But we've been managing 1 planning and 1 development review for more than a year, and it's been pretty effective. So I don't think that. The other thing is that nothing's broken. We're not trying to fix something that's broken. So we're just trying to adapt to the new structure that is that we have to, which is the planning and DRB. Zoning's not broken. Planning's not broken. Planning review isn't broken. We just have to change the way we're doing it. So minimizing the disruption is not necessarily, in my mind, a bad approach initially, until we get a better understanding of what this means, because we don't know what we don't know yet. I mean, that literally comes down. We don't know it yet.
Don't quote him.
But I just
Sorry.
wanted.
Okay?
I just
You
wanted-
know what I'm talking about?
No.
Yeah, oh, geez.
I wanted to follow up with QB's comment.
Which
though.
one?
So if we put
Starts with an R.
6 items on the agenda to come to a meeting, that means we have to have the work done. We might not get to it that night. The board members might not get to it that night, but staff has to have all those agenda items prepared. And that's what we're saying is, and right now we kind of control that, and it's been going towards our favor because they haven't been fast and furious. But if somebody met a deadline and we have 6 Pinewood eyes, for example, we're not going to have time to put them all on the same agenda.
I don't think anybody's, but I don't think we're saying that. I think we're all batting around the same.
And that's
the
what
same ball.
that's what I wanted to clarify with Hubie.
Yeah,
I thought that he was saying put them on, and if you have to continue them, but we can't put them on
I
if
think
staff hasn't done
it
the
also
work.
could depend on what the applications are too.
Yeah.
So
Right,
if
right.
you've got like a simple
Right,
conditional
consent,
use
right.
or consent, right, then it's easier to put more on.
Right.
But
I have a couple of questions, if I can jump in.
Who's that?
Trevor,
Daniel.
thing.
Daniel.
Daniel.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Well, first, a comment. I keep raising my hand, but I don't think anyone's paying attention to the Zoom.
That's good
and-
stuff. I'll sign in.
Yeah, but
That's the problem with these things.
One question: if we have a meeting with like 6 on the packet on the agenda, and we only get through 3, and we continue the meeting, how does that impact like quorum? Like, do we hold a quorum through that entire period? Because if we're continuing the meeting, does any communication outside of that meeting also fall within the rules of public disclosure? So that's one question and kind of reflection. Yeah, but we don't often continue meetings, right? So it's I don't know.
yeah, we have the like Pinewood Eye is continued right now.
Okay. Okay. So
That also goes in spurts.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we usually reschedule that to a regular,
When we have to
PC
continue, it goes in spurts.
so,
yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
don't we
that-
get
that-
caught in having to warn things,
Yeah. So it
If
sounds
it's
like
continued,
that's,
it's already been warned.
even though the date's changing?
You continue it to another date certain.
You don't close the public hearing. Once you close a public hearing, you have to rewarn and re-abut,
Oh, okay.
re-notify it. And we do notify the abutters of the continued date anyhow, but that's the difference.
All right, Daniel, did you have
More?
No, yeah, I'm sorry. I had a second question, and it was more directed towards. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can remember it off the top of my head now. It was when you have too much. Like, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. and it's hard to see on the screen. Sharon, yeah, sorry. Sharon, when you have too much work to do to put onto a single agenda, as you were talking about, like what happens? Do you just make some of the applicants wait until the next month? Is that the current process?
We have meeting dates and deadlines where they have to get it in by a certain date in order to get on that meeting. And if they get it in on that date, but it's not complete, they're missing items, they may not get on that meeting. It depends on how fast they can turn that around to get to us. Right now,
So hypothetically, let's go with your example from earlier. If we had 10 applications go through and all of them met the deadline and they had their stuff in order, would you be obliged to put all 10 on the agenda?
no, I think that we,
Currently, we don't do that sometimes.
Yeah.
We put people off to the next meeting.
you can only do what, the
Like
time,
first
unless
in
you
the
want us to
door.
work till like, 10 o'clock at
We're
night.
going sideways on this a little bit though.
Yeah.
So let's look at a realistic number. If we have, from the planning commission perspective, the most we ever have had in the last few years is 5. I don't think I've seen more than 5 applications on.
And
the
of those
agenda.
5, some of them are pretty easy,
Right.
like sketch. Can you imagine 5?
So if that's the case, then what's the concern about doing too much work on any given agenda if we're wanting to load it up, right? Like I was confused about that rebuttal that Sharon was providing earlier. It just didn't make sense. If the work has to be done and you need to put it on the agenda, why don't we just continue doing it the way we've been doing it?
Question I think that we were drifting away from is, do we have enough staff and resources to do more than the 2 meetings a month that we're essentially doing now, and moving it to 3 meetings a month or more? Because the planning commission and the DRB are going to have separate schedules. So the suggestion I offered originally was just to keep it at 1 planning and 1 DRB a month, to see if that works and see what's needed, because we may not need more than that, but we may, in which case, as Hubie said, if we get to a meeting, a DRB review, and the meeting is stacked and we can't get through everything, we can schedule another session to finish it.
Yeah.
And that's within the realm of, we could do that today if we wanted to. I mean, we can do it every time we do a continue.
And if that situation persisted, then you can go back and readjust the schedule, say, hey, guess what? Maybe we need to have 2 DRBs a month, so.
Well, I don't think there's going to be any rule that says you can't add a meeting the way we do currently. We can add a meeting. So if we received a whole bunch of applications in, we could,
Yeah, as long as we do our warnings correctly and all
do
that.
our
there's no
warnings.
problem.
And we'd also have to, ask the members, are you going to be available on this date?
Right.
So, I don't know, it's worked pretty well, but again, it's just how much can get done. And Daniel, I just wanted to tell you, there's also a process when an application comes in the door, we turf them off to police, fire, public works, and recreation. And oftentimes, if it's a winter season, we're not getting those comments back quickly enough to be able to complete our report. And sometimes that holds things up as well. So there's a whole bunch of different variables. So I would just ask that, for that type of consideration.
And this is all part of a recommendation we want to package anyway. So we could have a couple options in it. It could be an initial, let's do this for 12 months and then let's reevaluate, or let's do it for 6 months and reevaluate. And maybe we do it, maybe reevaluate every 6 months for 2 years or something. To get a larger subset of meetings in to understand if they work or not.
And staff is also not just doing DRB things, they're doing the planning commission. So there's meetings, staff is operating on both.
Daniel? Sorry, Kathy.
I think I'm on board with what you're saying, Dusty. I think that, keeping it very similar to how it's being done now, just with the boards or commissions separated, makes a lot of sense. And if we wanted to provide an alternative option to the select board, maybe we could have like a transition period, like once both the DRB and the planning commission are fully staffed, then we can have a decision about, how those schedules can be shifted, right? So either we do like a solid, like, let's go 12 months with it being exactly the same and then review, or we could say, let's transition gradually over the following year into a alternate schedule. I don't know, just suggestion.
Whatever recommendation we do, I think we should have an option to alter the cadence, whether it's ad hoc, because it get into a planning season, and planning may want to have more regular meetings. If you're in the middle of a big town plan update or something of that stature, it may make sense to just have it be a regularly scheduled event, but
No,
it seems like
we
that
do
would
it
be.
now, so it's working.
Yeah,
Ken, did you wanna-
I don't think this has been said yet, but at least for me as a staff member, having fewer meetings that might go longer is much more efficient. So having a meeting that's an extra hour versus another meeting that lasts an hour is so much more efficient, because you don't have the extra minutes, all the extra prep, all the extra sort of administrative stuff that goes into a meeting. So for me, as a staff person, just fewer meetings, even if they went longer, would be a much more efficient use of my time than more meetings that might be shorter, for what it's worth. But we certainly could start with fewer meetings and then just always add on more if we really.
Easier to expand than contract.
Catherine and Sharon, do you agree with that? Are bigger blocked meetings more efficient,
I think
more time?
absolutely. It's all going to depend on what's coming in the door, and is it small? Could we have 5 small things? Sure.
Yeah.
And I'd say on the planning commission side, I don't know, it might be better to have shorter, like say a 2-hour meeting limit, and then, have twice a month.
Yeah, I think that
Personally, that is my experience
Yeah.
from other towns.
Yeah.
Before you start losing them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's only so much you can do on one topic for a period of time. And if you stack it with 5 different things and hours, I think that's too long for.
Yeah.
But I don't anticipate that we would need to do that necessarily.
And the planning commission also will be able to continue their meeting if it happened to
Could
be.
add on extra meetings.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
What are the rules of engagement for the planning commission, since they're no longer quasi judicial? Do they have the same requirements for warnings and so forth? So
Only if you're doing like a town plan update or zoning regulation updates.
discussions and so forth can happen. You have more options, I guess.
Yeah,
would be a
you
better
just
term.
need 48 hours for an agenda. If it's a special meeting, it's 24 hours to put that together. So you don't have to, you're not notifying abutters, or it doesn't have to go warned. There's no requirement to warn it like in a newspaper either. So.
Oh. You weren't pointing at me. Do you have records that you can look back at for the past 3 or 4 years to see if there were particular times of the year that
Yeah, probably Sharon
I'm
might
sorry.
be our living record person.
I
Do
was
we? Are
distracted.
there certain times of years or certain time of year where it's busier for development applications?
it's usually around Christmas time is a little slower.
that would be
Sometimes, usually summer are slower, but COVID years and since, it's been, people have been coming in and all the honey-do lists because they're working from home, and there's a lot. So it ebbs and flows.
and it hasn't really settled yet.
No,
Plus, I don't know that it's going to, because we now have climate refugees coming. So,
it's
I just didn't know if
less
there.
than some.
I mean, logically, to me, it would be, in the spring would be when you'd be getting, a lot more going on, and then, a sort of
Summer is usually lighter because people are taking their vacations
Right.
and things, but as I said, during
You know,
COVID,
and then
nobody could go anywhere, and we were,
then
It was
you know, early fall tends to get busy as people are trying to get something done before winter.
you just never
But it
know.
depends on what we're talking about for applications too. So it's different for zoning permit than you would see for subdivision when somebody's trying to plan ahead for the construction season.
Yeah, right.
So that you might see that in the fall more because it takes a long time to go through that and they have to do Act 250 after that. So it's, if it's a site plan, they probably don't need as much time, and so maybe that is winter, spring.
I mean, it sounds like we're all bouncing around in getting maybe into the weeds more than we need to.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing
We beat that
is
pretty good.
Yeah,
The-
that
the
horse is
once
not
a
getting
month.
up again.
once a month for each board is kind of what I'm
With the expectation that the cadence will be evaluated
Yeah,
and adjusted as needed.
yeah, and a reevaluation.
After 1 year, but
After a
during
year.
the year,
I think
As
as
needed.
as
Right.
needed.
No, I think there's two things. I would
Okay.
say if we need to add meetings during the year, they get added, but then say that let's reevaluate how that's working after a year.
I think the next point that he made early on, you can't do it. You can't do it too quickly. You've got to give it time to really see what you're going to see the ups and downs before you can adjust. You shouldn't have a knee-jerk reaction to one bad event or one challenging event until we see if they're all going to be what side of the scale they're all on.
Right.
I
Okay,
didn't
so
say it
back,
exactly like that, I know, but
back to our issues here. So let's move on from that. I think we're good there. So we're going to need to amend the zoning regulations. And this does not have to be done by the time the DRB is formed. It should be done, I'd say, be in the process from when it's happening, but it doesn't have to be done. Development applications. So you,
Daniel has his hand raised. We have a chance.
Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Dusty and Catherine. Which zoning regulations would need to be amended? Is this specifically to determine the authorities of the DRB as the planning commission?
Yes.
Okay. Will there?
Previous planning commission meeting, we talked about maybe trying to merge the zoning and the subdivision regulations into one document. So that might be a project to do at the same time. I think that would be great.
That would eliminate some language challenges and potentially having to address the same question multiple times.
And referencing one document is a whole lot easier than two or more.
That's for sure.
Especially since there's primarily going to be one group looking at
Yeah.
one document.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think that what I'm hoping is that we could, I don't know if it will happen today, but have more of an opportunity to determine where the authorities and responsibilities are distributed, if that makes sense.
What do you
It's
mean
pretty clear on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
what I was asking is, so yes, we need to amend the zoning regulations. Those amendments will determine what the planning commission can do and what the DRB can do, yes?
The planning commission's quasi-judicial role to the DRB.
Right.
And any place where it mentions the ZBA, it becomes the DRB. Planning commission's role doesn't change, and I don't think that's planning commission's really going to be mentioned much in the zoning anymore, because they're not administering zoning regulations, or they won't be anymore.
Well, they would be enacting policy around what regulations would be enforced, though, right? I mean, that's the just.
Zoning regulations, if that's what you mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And town plan updates and any sort of long range or short term planning projects. But they would not be administering the rules any longer. They're making the rules.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
You did with the second. You just go through.
Yeah. So I don't think that's a heavy lift. I think combining the regulations is a little heavier of a lift than the changing names.
Yeah, there are places, I think it's conditional uses, isn't it, where it says the planning commission has a has a shot
Right.
at it.
Yep.
You know, it's kind of like, and they give a nod, yeah, okay, and then it comes to the,
Right.
the zoning board for approval. So that kind of language would
Exactly.
disappear, yeah.
Yep. Okay. So one other interesting thing here is that talking about development applications that are in midstream. So there cannot be any projects out there that don't have an approval with them. So for example, if somebody submits to the zoning board a conditional use application in November, you have to hear it in December and make a decision before January 1st. If you don't, then it has to be resubmitted to the zoning board.
Yep.
Or staff says you're gonna have to wait until January, or the DRB is gonna hear it. If you have an application, say like Pinewood I, that is a multi-step application, right now they're in the middle of preliminary. If you don't issue a decision on preliminary by January 1st, they have to start over at sketch.
So it would be just that step in the process?
Yeah,
not
right.
Not the
Yeah,
whole
exactly.
approval? Okay.
They could come on January 1st for final if preliminary has been,
Yeah.
a decision has been. So that could mean at the end of the year, both boards are a little busier than normal, trying to finish things up that are in midstream.
Yeah, and this year we didn't have any meetings in December.
So here's a thought going sideways. If we have reviews like Pinewood that come before us, what would you guys feel be the feasibility of sitting with us at the table to hear the applications? To start hearing that portion of the application that you haven't necessarily heard before.
Well, you're making an assumption that some of the zoning board members are going to be on the DRB.
No, I'm just,
No,
I'm making an assumption that everybody that's currently sitting is going to have an option to be in one or the other. We haven't even talked about that yet,
Yeah.
but that would be
Yeah.
my proposal,
Yeah.
that anybody currently on the planning or ZBA would have the option of being on one or the other, or both in some cases. But yeah, I am making an assumption
Yeah.
that potentially somebody on the existing ZBA will want to be on the DRB, and same thing with somebody in the planning will want to be on the DRB. Pinewood is a multi-phase application that I don't foresee it getting a final before January 1st of next year.
Yeah, they get their preliminary.
Let's not get into details.
Well, I just want to make sure they are not starting over.
That's not what I meant. I'm saying I don't anticipate that being done, so I would anticipate them coming back for final after January 1st of this coming year. Meaning the DRB would hear the final. And if people that are currently, we're going to hear the preliminary prior to the end of this calendar year. So it would be an opportunity for anybody other than Trevor, who's already sitting on both, to at the very least sit at the table. We've invited people in before to ask questions and so forth. We've had members of the village, when they were still the village, PC sit here as guests and participate in the discussions to further the knowledge. So the voting, it would not be voting members. We couldn't do that, but it would be an adjunct visiting,
And it
Sort
could
of
be done
preparation.
remotely as well. You wouldn't have to be in person,
Yeah, that's
or even watching the video.
Being a quasi-judicial body, is it appropriate for members to do preliminary investigation or hear information before making a determination when it's in front of them in the meeting?
it's a public hearing, so nothing would be done outside of the public hearing. There'd be no ex parte discussion. It'd be a member of the public that we invited to sit at the table with us.
Yeah, if a current ZBA member attended, just as a public member, just as an audience member.
A member of the public.
A member of the public, thank you. And then later on in 2025 or potentially later, we would hear that in the application finalized and then be in front of the DRB. Is there any conflict there?
I think there is.
I
I think there is
as well.
because to me, I would make the analogy this is like a court system. Okay?
Right.
So you had a
Yes.
ruling from this level at the planning commission on site plan review, and now, so the next step, we're in a DRB. Now it's going to DRB. That's like, if you interpose both of them together, that's like having two levels of judgment rule on the same thing.
So I agree.
And I think it's like,
not ideal.
I think it's like what you do, January 1st, you tear off the bandage, okay? And what's done is done, all right? So if something's gone through a site plan review and that's been approved, fine, now they're on to the next step. It's a different body that's hearing it. It's like, it's a brand new thing.
Well, if you
Brand
have an
new thing.
application though, like say like Pinewood that has gotten through preliminary and then they're ready to be heard or in final in February, it is what it is. It has to be the new board that's hearing it.
Yeah.
And maybe we'd say to them, hurry up, get your stuff in so it can be completed in December. Like that would be better in my mind.
The evidence is gonna be there. I mean, you're gonna have the evidence of the approval and so on.
I
So
think
next
that the
step-
message, though, if the assumption that some of the sitting planning commission members are gonna be on the DRB, it shoots that, your concern all to heck, because you're still gonna get continuity. So I'm okay with not, but it's a matter of if it's a review that, a level of review or a type of review that you haven't done, it's an opportunity to see and be aware of, number one, it's a public forum. You're not making a judicial decision on it.
I have no problem with someone from the public attending a planning commission meeting, but to have someone from the zoning board sit in and participate, I don't think that's appropriate.
Were you talking about participating or more just being there to be more?
I was considering it as we had done with the village planning commissioners when we invited them to the table to participate as basically community at that time commissioners. In
with
this
no,
case,
like no voting.
there's no voting. There's no weight on the discussion. It was really just to have an opportunity to see how the applications were reviewed, the way that the staff reports were evaluated, the discussions and so forth. So there was never any question about whether or not there was any voting rights or voting ability, because they weren't on the board, and that's not at all a question. But the ZBA are appointed members of a board in this town, and they do have a status that is not just a general, when you're in the room, you're a ZBA member, not just a member of the public.
Well, you
But
could be at a
that's-
planning
that's-
commission meeting and be a member of the public, be on the ZBA and testify for a particular application as a member of the public.
Not looking for
being-
testimony, though. That's fine, Hubie. We'll let it roll. I'm not.
Yeah, being a ZBA member doesn't preclude you from being a member of the public.
Vice versa as well.
Yeah, so that's happened before. As a matter of fact, I saw it happen with the select board. One of the select board members came before the zoning board, and one of his neighbors had an application, and the select board member, said, yeah, I'm a member of the select board. I'm not speaking for the select board. I'm speaking as a member of the public. And that would be the same way if we wanted to attend as a ZBA member to attend a planning commission meeting. So that's the way I see it.
I don't, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Would it be okay if when it came time to send out the packet, when there was the new zoning board, if part of the packet was the video of the previous? Yeah, and that's just available for everybody. And so if you have, new members, they can go back and watch that as a way of.
Yeah, I think that'd be probably an encouragement for them to do that. So like all our planning meetings, when community TV isn't here, they're all on the town YouTube channel anyway, so they're available for people.
It's a link.
And their videos are available up on their website. They're all are there.
I think the point of encouragement, don't know who's going to know that we have an application. Probably won't make, hope it does, but if it doesn't, maybe members might be interested in wanting to go to the DRB, come there as a member of the question, if you ask questions or something, I see, okay, now a month. Seems like there would be a conflict there. I would think at that point you would have.
You'd have to recuse. That's how you'd have to do. Yeah, you'd have good reason.
Yeah, that's a good point too, that if we did happen to come to a planning commission meeting and heard some of the, if you want to use the Pinewood as an example, and then that continues on to the DRB, is that a conflict? Yeah, would you have to recuse ourselves because we were involved in a previous part of the application or the previous application?
Remember too that we are in a unique situation, is that we are preparing for the transition to the DRB. So framing the education and the basically mentoring of members who may or may not move on to the DRB is still a task that we need to do. We can hit the ground running on January 1. But that is going to, I mean, opportunity or not, it's an option in my mind. It doesn't provide a conflict if we identify members as such. You wouldn't be able to comment as far as, hey, I don't like this and I'm violently against this. That would be probably come back and bite you in the butt later on.
There's got to be a precedent or an example from one of the other towns that transitioned that potentially they had a similar situation. So we don't want to get in trouble as a community, but we also do want to learn the process and know what's appropriate when we're taking those steps.
So the two towns that I talked to didn't raise that as having been a problem. I think Essex Junction said they just weren't very busy. So I don't think they had anything that was carrying over.
So the problem is where you have an application that straddles the time frame.
Right. So there aren't a lot of other towns who have done this recently either. So like it's a pretty small pool for me to talk to for questions like this.
Maybe the question is just for regional, or is there any
recommendations?
Is there a recommendation? Are we going to have, if we have the opportunity, hang on, Daniel, you're next, I guess. We have the opportunity for domain knowledge sharing. Is it putting us at risk for conflict of interest if the members who are not active planning commissioners sit in a town board member, as a town ZBA member on a planning commission meeting, sit in as an invited discussion participant, non-voting? Is that going to put us at risk later on in any capacity? Now I'm going to shut up. It doesn't happen often or for very long.
Is that a confession?
Yes, it's an acknowledgement. It's
a fact. Did I hear Daniel, you wanted to talk?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I see the challenge with the conflict of interest. I think that's why we're moving to this type of model anyway, right? Because right now that conflict is incumbent upon the structure that we currently have, and so given that we are already doing that with our current structure in transition, I think that there needs to be a clear demarcation of when that transition takes place, and whoever gets appointed to the DRB is appointed to that board after the demarcation line, right? After the point where the board is actually functioning and active, thereby that distinguishes between when folks were serving on the planning commission versus when they transitioned to the DRB. I can understand that there may be some folks that are on the planning commission now that switch into the DRB when it becomes active. But I don't think that that will be an issue unless they are actively engaged in the ZBA right now, right? I think that's where even in other situations where if I went and was discussing things with the select board as as in the same way that you guys are talking about, I think that does exert too much too much interference, I would say, in other parties' responsibilities. And with the DRB being established, I think that trying to keep those lines as clear as possible as we make the transition would make the most sense. Those are my thoughts on the subject.
I just end with Catherine. It is what it is. I mean, this. Hopefully, they can get.
So maybe the other option to try to resurrect the horse is our recommendation is that the DRB Planning Commission be appointed by July 1 as designated incumbent. Incumbent? No, not what's it voted? What's the office? The office appointed, but it's appointed effective as of January 1. Once they have a designation of a DR, because this comes into effect January 1, 2025.
DRB member in waiting.
whatever it is, I don't know. There's got to be a term for it when you've been appointed, but your office doesn't take effect to January 1.
Elect.
Okay.
Yeah, I could check in to
But
that. I mean, I would.
The point being that if they've been appointed, then there should be no conflict of being an active listener on the planning commission meetings as they wind down through the rest of the year, so that they can be aware of any applications that complete sketch or complete preliminary, because everything that is not in final is apt to come back.
There could be a
following
complicated ZBA application.
Right,
too,
it could be
in
anything
that
from one way or the
number.
other.
Yeah.
True.
I mean,
My simple point is that if we have an opportunity for knowledge, if we get some of these, if you hit Pinewood, I've listened to Pinewood now for almost 20 years, and if you come in completely out of the blue and you hear Pinewood for the very first time, you lose a lot of context. Not that it's a bad thing, but you don't have a lot of knowledge to get there. Whereas if we have some awareness of the applications in their earlier phases, it will help the DRB be more effective when they start hit the ground. When the Band-Aid gets ripped off and they have to look at something, there's some awareness of what was done before.
Another easy solution. Or
Yeah.
switch from planning commission to DRB. That- Remember how- And so
Anyways.
if you don't watch it,
We put ours up on the YouTube channel though that we're recording tonight.
right? Okay.
So
So
we
that's
have
it.
like either
Right.
way they're recorded.
Too much time and it's not
Right.
worth
Yeah.
it for the recommendation for the select board. So let's get to the real stuff.
maybe we should have a new category called transitional members.
Transcendental movie.
It looks like we've got a couple hands, Ken and Daniel. Why don't we go with Daniel first?
Yeah,
I
no,
know.
I think that Ken is just saying we can't hear Sharon very well. He put something in the chat as well that you two folks can't hear Sharon very well. But Ken, if there's more you have to say, by all means, keep your hand raised. But I just wanted to voice what was in the chat as well. I think no, and I was wanting to. I like the idea of having folks appointed prior to January 1st, for the DRB. And if some of those folks are in the planning commission, I think that would help to determine how many new staff members we need to fill the planning commission if there are members that are transitioning over to the DRB. My question though would be like, if someone on the planning commission is appointed to the DRB, would they then have to recuse themselves or no longer participate fully as a voting member on the planning commission for the rest of the year?
I don't think so.
I think it was the recommendation be appointed. You won't be active in the transition into, let them know, make the appointment in July. Did I hear that right?
I think July is too early.
I agree.
But
But is that what I heard earlier?
yeah,
It's like,
I think that was the
you'll know
Well-
the intention is come January, you are going to be a DIB.
It's 4 meetings. Really?
well. I'm not sure we'll be at the point yet where we can
Fair
do
enough.
That's my thought. Not too
Fair
early to be planning it. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of little things. Like I think we need to get an idea from sitting planning commission members and ZBA members of what your preference would be. Right? Do you want to stay on the planning commission? Does somebody who is on the zoning board want to be on the planning commission? You know, just get an idea. And if does somebody want to be on both? Like would Trevor want to continue on both?
Catherine, I think Ken still got his hand raised. I'm not sure.
I do. Hi, folks. If you remember, I think a meeting ago or one before that, I suggested a bit of a transition plan, and Mr. Chairman Dusty, you asked me to set that in writing, which I did. And I don't see it included in the packet now. It does cover a lot of what you're discussing. It seems pretty simple to me. I don't understand why it sounds so complicated. It really doesn't need to be.
And I don't think it is that complicated. I think we're just throwing out a lot of ideas tonight, and it's the first time that we've all sit down to talk about it together. So
Well, that graphic representation, I think, would be helpful.
like maybe I misread what you said. I didn't agree that it would necessarily all of that work. You can't have an overlap of the ZBA and the DRB at the same time. So you can't have a new board hearing applications till the old one is done, for example.
Well, the pre-DRB would need to be, you'll need to have those folks appointed before January 1st because they need to train. They need to become ready. So even though they may not be constituted as the DRB, they are, as somebody suggested, the DRB in waiting. I mean, you're going to need to do that, I think, because they.
The way I read what you wrote was impossible, but what you're saying is not now. So I'm sorry if I misunderstood.
That misinterpreted what I suggested. I mean, the key is that the select board needs to get moving and figure out who's going to be on which, advertise, appoint, and then on July 1st, the pre-DRB or the DRB in waiting starts preparing, training, and you now have a cutoff date. And prior to that July 1st cutoff date, you can't really be continuing on with other projects. You need to, the planning commission needs to wind down what they're working on, obviously. And then on the January 1st, the new DRB takes over.
I think that's what we're all saying. Don't disagree. The
Coming
problem
back-
is you can't, if we have an application that is in midstream, you can't cut them off. And if somebody submits an application in September, it's not fair to say you have to wait until January. So, we can't plan on what's coming in the door and how quickly it's moving.
So on July 1st, the old planning commission would no longer take development review applications, would be what I suggested.
Can't do that until the DRB is actually formed.
That's going to present a problem.
Right.
So I think we've identified an example that we would want to do some research behind the scenes a little bit for staff, and then get back to us.
I
for our
agree.
next
Yeah, I
discussion.
think we're
Simple.
beating
Let
a
me
dead
just ask
horse.
one quick question and then I'll say goodbye. Catherine, where did you get the idea that the DRB and the planning commission can't exist at the same time? They
Planning commission can, but the planning commission's until the DRB is formed, the planning commission still reviews the development applications. So when the DRB comes along, planning commission no longer has that capacity, and then also the zoning board goes away.
So then, as I said, that the planning commission will just continue those applications that it has in the pipeline and no more new.
No,
Nope.
that can't happen.
Statute says.
It
it's clear.
switches, all the authority switches to the DRB when the DRB forms.
So then you really have to have the DRB listening and being ready to take on those applications that are in midstream.
Barely.
All right,
So-
let's move on. Is that okay?
Yep.
I feel like
Certainly.
we have some differing opinions here.
And that-
not just you, Ken. I'm saying, in the room as well.
But that was the point of
So-
tonight, really, is so
Yep.
that the
Hammer it
ZBA
out.
and the planning commission can start bringing these,
Great, yep.
our thoughts to light.
Exactly.
All right, so one more issue on this slide. So rules of procedure will need to be formed. So both right now, the zoning board and the PC have their own. I imagine they'll change a bit. So I think there should be some work done ahead of time and looking at that, probably more on the staff side. But if we have this like sort of the DRB in waiting, maybe there can be some thought put into it. But I think that's probably mostly a staff issue, but probably have those actual rules of procedure be adopted at the first meeting that those boards have.
I'm glad you went to these other towns. Like, I'm a firm believer in not reinventing the wheel. Other boards have gone through this. I did a little looking. I looked at Westford's, 10 pages long, their procedures. And I think that might be because they had a couple of issues up there. If you headed towards Fairfax, okay? But anyway, it's interesting. I mean, holy mackerel, they covered, just about everything,
Yeah,
I think.
everything.
So it can be very complicated. It can be 1 or 2 pages too. So sometimes you make things too complicated. It becomes burdensome. But anyway, Westford, 10 pages. Holy mackerel.
Did they have TED clauses?
What's that?
They have TED clauses?
Oh, I don't know.
So the two bodies will vote on those at their first meeting.
That would
They
be
can
my-
they can amend them at that time as well.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
just want to make
right,
that
because
clear.
planning commission will have existing
Yeah.
rules.
But a lot of them will be able to be dropped because.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Say that again?
You won't need most of them or you won't need some of them because they're referring to applications.
Right.
Yeah. But you still will have some public hearings, so that would still.
And you're right. I think by the same token, probably the operating procedures for the zoning board would be expanded in order to include those kinds of things. So
Maybe
yeah,
just
there's a
take the two
give and
documents
take.
and meld them
Yeah.
and then see what.
Yep.
Throw it into AI.
that far
Throw it into
Yeah.
AI. There you go. Chat GPT.
Okay, so this is, I think, some of this I feel like we've kind of fleshed out a little bit already. But staff, we talked about some things, and these would be our recommendations. And again, I think we've talked about some of this, but so membership, we thought it would be a good idea to have some membership overlap. Again, the Regional Planning Commission thought that was a good idea. Don't know if there's interest in that. So one member on both boards could do more, but I think one would be enough. That doesn't mean, though, that it wouldn't be recommended that some planning commissioners just go to the DRB. So you wouldn't have to necessarily stay on the planning commission. So it's different between the overlap and then the expertise of the planning commission moving over to the DRB. So the planning commission is not your role. The planning commission's role is changing, but the planning commission itself is not having to be reformed. And so a recommendation would be that those who want to stay on the planning commission stay, continue out your terms that you have. There would be new planning commission members possibly that would be coming on if some are leaving. So the new members would need to be appointed by the select board. So that would be recommendation. And then, so that anybody who would be on the DRB would need to be appointed by the select board. So even if you're an existing ZBA member, everybody since it's a new board, there would be new. Recommendation would be the select board that please keep our board members that want to stay, because we need the institutional knowledge, we need the expertise, need the experience.
And if they're not inclined, so maybe consider letting them finish their term.
They don't have a DRB, so they don't have,
Yeah.
they don't
There's
have a term. for
zoning
the
board.
DRB.
Yeah, so I mean, what I would like to do, you know, when we're talking to the select board is just try to, you know, if they're not inclined to think this way, let's try to plead the case if you're all on board with it too. I don't want to force it. It's my decision in the end. Suggesting that there be 5 members on the DRB with 2 alternate members, and then 7 members as currently is on the commission.
So why 5?
That was the recommendation of the Regional Planning Commission, but you know, if you look at the chart that I had, there's quite a range of members. Like I think one said 9. I don't think anyone had less than 5. Some had 7, and then alternates can range in numbers as well.
I'm thinking back in, you know, over the years, times that we've actually had 7 members present, been few and far between. There's been few meetings in a row, but for the most part, you know, with 7, it's very awkward when there's 4 people voting. You have to have an absolute majority. So if you get down,
But hopefully we'd have alternates.
All 4 would have to vote.
all 4 would have to vote, but an alternate isn't necessarily a guaranteed member. I mean, Paul is the exception because you've been coming anyways, and you've been here right along, but
Well, that
Anyway.
was just a suggestion, kind of looking at what was recommended, but I'm not sure I see a negative to
And
7.
I can see a benefit to having 2 alternates, but it also makes it confusing.
More so than having 1, or
Yeah, I think, yeah. Okay, well, you know, who's going to take what meeting, what month, and how do you know that ahead of time? And I mean, it's just, I mean, it's sort of like the issue of whether I need to be available or not. I just assume that there's a possibility that I could be available and not know it until the meeting. So
right.
So I
Which is-
prepare
which
for
is
I prepare
legitimate.
for all the meetings, and I
Right. And the other side too is what if that alternate fails?
Well, then, yeah,
If we don't have the.
I don't have the 2 even.
Daniel.
All right, Daniel, did I hear you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. I think 5 members on the DRB makes a lot of sense. You know, for the size of Essex and for the professional or capacity with expertise. It can be difficult to try and maintain staffing levels or, you know, the board levels for all of that. And so I don't think trying to do like 7 and 7 again, you know, maybe we could fill all those spaces, but to Dusty's point, very rare do we get full 7 at the planning commission. And so having less than 5, I think would be difficult because, you know, then you're just putting more control and authority into the hands of fewer people. And so I think 5 is good. I also just think that, you know, having the 2 alternates makes a lot of sense. And I don't think that has to be confusing at all. You know, yeah, just put more regulations around when planning commission members have to respond to whether or not they'll be available. And then, well, yeah, that does happen. And then, you know, I think that if you are willing to sign up as an alternate, as an alternate, then you should be available whenever that commission or board is meeting. You should, that's the responsibility that you're signing up for, right? Well, I'm not saying you specifically, I'm saying like in the future. So there shouldn't be an issue with time and capacity, right? You know, if you're an alternate, you should be always considering that you're going to need to be at the meeting when meetings are held. Yeah.
I think he's saying you do.
I'm not, you know, saying you've done anything different, Paula. What I'm saying is like, that makes it really simple, right? Because either the alternates are available or they're not, and then we just push the meeting if everyone's not available.
Been a very functional number. We've been able to, very few times have we had a meeting with 6 members and come to a tie, and we haven't been able to come to a decision. And I think the more viewpoints to a point are better than fewer. And it's whether it's 5 or 7. I mean, the alternate, I think having an alternate is a benefit. It'll might keep us from having to call a meeting, postpone a meeting. I would vote for 7 just because it provides a greater depth knowledge at the table than 5. That's all. Simple
7
as
for
that.
the DRB or the planning
Both.
commission? Both, you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
The only
5.
benefit,
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just thinking the only benefit I can see of having the 5 and the 2 alternates is if there is still that ethical worry about having somebody on both boards, maybe that could be assuaged a bit by having the planning commission member who's also on the DRB be alternate. That might be less bothersome. I don't personally think it's an ethical concern, but I know some people do, and I can understand that. I wonder if that might feel more comfortable. That's the only benefit I can see to having the alternate.
I think
The 7.
the word alternate would, I think what Daniel said, it needs to be clarified. If you're an alternate in a jury, you don't go home and wait to be called in. You have to sit in and listen
You have to be
all the
there.
time. You have to be there all the
Right, right.
time.
That's right.
So,
Sorry.
alternate is not like sitting home and if nobody shows up, then you get a call. You got to be there.
How has, now, the zoning board has 5 members.
Yeah, we've never had alternates that I'm aware of.
And has 5 been an okay number?
Sometimes,
Do
well,
you-
if we have all 5, they're fine, but when we're short people, we've been
You
down
need
to like
alternates.
3 sometimes,
Yeah.
then you have to have a
Yeah.
unanimous vote.
Do you wish you
which-
had a more? Like, do you think 7 would be a better number?
I think 5 is not a bad number.
I
If you can
I
keep the-
agree. We're
if-
functional at 5.
Yeah, if you keep
assuming
it-
that we have
Yeah,
that
if you
number
have
or
them all
4.
there, if everybody shows
If
up,
it's
when you
fewer,
So
get,
alternates, that's
trouble.
why 2, I think,
It-
is more important.
But if you have 2 alternates and you're expecting them to stay current, are we going to, there's going to be a stipend for them or not? I mean, this is where it gets dicey. You're asking somebody to do potentially 2 more people, 2 alternates, to attend a meeting and to stay current with the applications. 'Cause that's one of the benefits of having the alternate is if they're current with the applications, they understand what's going on. Yubi's point, they're current. Maybe they're not in every meeting, but they're watching every meeting or they're listening.
The expense to the town.
Just
is
so,
so
I think that's exactly the point, is that, the alternate should be in attendance as often as they are able to be there, just like any other member of the board or commission. Yeah. So the only difference is that, when they are stepping in as an alternate, they vote. That doesn't, but as an alternate that, if the full board is there, and the alternates are also there, they can listen in and participate, but they can't vote on things. That's the primary difference, right?
And if
Well,
you're
they're
gonna,
there to be aware of what is going on with the DRB, with ongoing applications, just as you said, Dusty, right?
we're using the same arguments to sort of come at 2 different points. I think if you're going to be attending, you should be a board member, be a regular voting member, and it gives you 7 members means you need to have 4 minimum to vote. You have 5 members, you have 3 minimum to vote. Majority of the seated commissioners. So 3 people voting on an application, I got to tell you that can be pretty dicey, because if you've only got 3 opinions instead of 5, or 3 opinions instead of 7, and you don't have as broad a decision. I think we're short-circuiting ourselves a little bit, undercutting ourselves by narrowing the field. That said, an alternate, I don't necessarily believe that an alternate has to attend every meeting, but they need to stay aware and current. Asking 2 people to do that without having true participatory rights I think is rude. I mean, as simple as that. You're gonna put the time in, but you're not gonna get the, you're not gonna get the, essentially the acknowledgement.
The glory.
Yeah, sure, the glory. It's a way to participate without getting blamed for everything, and that's.
Well, there's that.
So anyways,
I would be curious to see if anyone's interested in even being an alternate. I mean,
Well,
I'll
that's another point, is it, the difficulty you had in filling out the zoning board. My God, how long do we run without
Right.
a full board?
And then
But
that's
it's
a
more
question.
appealing now
my
that it's-
point too, though, and that's why I think, having 7 and 7 would be really challenging, right? Trying to just fill the board would be, if we have a hard time filling 5 on the zoning board, how are we going to fill 7 regularly? If we fill 5, then the alternates could be like buffer zones. That's like a hedge, right? And I hear you about it being kind of rude, but if everyone's aware of like what your role is as an alternate when you sign up for the job, then there's no rudeness there, right? Because you're willingly accepting that responsibility as it's described.
Can they change? We don't even get alternate. Nobody applies to be an alternate. Select board
Change
say,
the number.
let's-
Yeah. Of actual DRB members, and we
Right.
still have alternates as a possibility too.
Will the alternate continue in the PC role as it is now?
No.
PC can't have alternates.
Right.
Okay.
Unless you're in Williston.
Williston.
Oops.
Okay. So, meetings, suggest having semi-annual joint meetings with the PC and the DRB. If we have some membership on, that's like one person on both boards, that's going to be really helpful with communication. But I think if we don't, and even if we do, it's a good idea to have regular check-ins. Make sure that the DRB is involved in any sort of zoning updates, even planning projects. I mean, I think it's good for the planning commission to know what the DRB is going to be working on, or what they are working on, or what they're struggling with. So just good communication, and planned meetings. So not just making sure like staff is communicating back and forth, which we will, but really
So
have
you
those
can
meetings.
Include them in the operating procedure, so so it's documented that there's
Yep.
make it a requirement.
For those meetings.
I think, and it was even mentioned in the one of the documents you sent us. One of the concerns is that the two boards become disconnected, and you can't, if you plan in a vacuum without seeing the end result, which is one of the functions that the planning commission currently sees, is they see the regulations and then they try to apply them to an application.
And there is one of the main reasons for having the DRB established. Okay, is because, and this has always been like a conundrum in my mind, is that you have a legislative body that makes the rules and then they apply the rules. Where else in the government does that happen?
But we also see where the rules are broken. So we also see where things are screwed up. So
Oh yeah, no, but I'm saying that you make the rules, and then when you make a quasi judicial decision, you're applying those rules. Where else in our government, state or federal, does that work that way? It doesn't. Okay, and that's why this is one of the reasons for the DRB. I think there are two reasons. That's one of them. The other one is to take the load off the planning commission so the planning commission can plan.
Plan, right.
That was one of the main drivers. But I think another one was to separate that legislative aspect from the judicial aspect.
I'll grant you your point.
Thank you.
I don't see it as much. I don't see
Yeah.
it quite like that, because one of the things that you have from planning, when you do the planning without having the direct understanding of the application, you don't see the unintended consequences. So I think what Catherine was just mentioning, though, is a method to make those unintended consequences be visible to the planning body.
Don't disagree with that at
So
all.
that-
I think this is a good idea.
That's why
This having the PC and the DRB, talk together, that's fine.
And actually,
Yeah.
whether or not it should or shouldn't is irrelevant, because it's already been decided for us, right? So it's going to be separated. So if the piece that is missing is the conduit between the two bodies or knowledge sharing, let's memorialize it from the beginning.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I mean, I'm saying, this
We're
is,
on the right
this
page.
is
We're
town
good.
local government, okay? It's not like when the president gives his State of the Union message, and all those guys and gals in their big robes sit there and show no emotion because they don't want to show any partisanship, okay? You know, it's like, to me, it's one of those clear examples of the separation of the judiciary from the executive and the legislative branch. And what we have in this arrangement, the current arrangement, is not quite like that. But we're a small operation, you know, so we can have interaction and so on. So,
I think we declare victory and move on.
yes, I agree.
Sounds good. Okay, staff. Suggestion would be that me, the community development director, or whoever else might be it someday, and the town planner be part of the PC meetings, where the town planner would kind of continue as we do today, do the site plan, PUD, subdivisions, and appeals, which I guess is maybe, I'm not sure who does that usually. But it's usually appeal of the zoning administrator's decision. So I think it'd be better to have somebody else do it. And then the zoning administrator would do consent agenda variance and conditions. It's currently all. Okay.
So
Daniel again.
I actually had my hand raised before on the prior discussion point before we moved up on, but I was just going to say, you know, in terms of having clear communication between the DRB and the Planning Commission, I think that can be achieved in a variety of ways, one of which could be, you know, reports, or we're already having biannual meetings, so maybe as a part of the procedures for those meetings, we would have a readout from the DRB about complications that are arising in their hearings, and submit those to the Planning Commission for consideration upon changing those statutes or those regulations or whatever policies are having issues, right? That's how communication could take place between the board and the commission without having too much fraternization between the two, right? You know, so I think that there are many ways that we could do that without muddying the waters and having too much interplay, because I strongly agree that there needs to be a clear separation between them.
And that's a valid point too, for having a planning commissioner sit on the DRB. That, you know, they can see, they participate in an application and see how their regulations that they've created, what's working. They can go back or to the planning commission. A hiccup.
And remember,
Other regulations.
staff is going to be doing both and aware of both. I think we'll be in an okay spot.
But I still would go back to saying, I don't think we're broken now. Nope. Even with respect to your thinking, Yubi, that we should have a different separation. I don't think we're broken. You know, this isn't a question of we're trying to fix something that's broken and wrong and it's not working. I think we're just, we're making a change. No, we're not even streamlining.
I would have to disagree pretty directly. Whether this is functioning right now or not, I would agree with you that the town of Essex is functioning. But I think that without having that separation between the Planning Commission and the DRB, that is a broken system. That's why it's changing. No,
And that, Daniel, I've been at this for a while, so and maybe because I've been at this for a while, I don't see it as clearly, or I don't see it with your perspective. But I don't think it's a broken system, and that's not the issue, right? The issue is that we are changing.
Decision is made.
We're not trying to justify it. We're not trying to say why we are changing. So how do we change most effectively? And this is where all the different perspectives come into play. The separation, the communication, that's all part of what we're just trying to map out in a prospectus that we want to send to the select board for them to consider. So I mean, we can all disagree on it, but it really isn't we're not making a choice to do this or not.
Well,
we're just figuring out how.
The point, Dusty. Yes, we can all disagree on it, But what we're disagreeing on is how it's going to be formed, not that it should be formed. And the suggestions that continue to come up on how it's going to be formed is to muddy the waters and bring people in communication between the board and the commission, which doesn't work for people. That's why the DRB is being created, so that that can be a separate responsibility, so that that could be a separate power given to people in a quasi judicial position. Right. So like to say we're arguing about the wrong thing here is to kind of gaslight people, Dusty, just a little bit. I apologize if I'm being too frank here, but I think you're the one that's pushing beside the point by trying to ignore the issues that several people have brought up already in this meeting.
Fair enough. What I'm trying not to do is have this be a confrontational event, because it's not a question of whether or not we move forward. So however the groups want to move things forward, we move them forward. I don't agree with all the reasonings that people are bringing up, but that doesn't mean you can't move forward on them. So Daniel, I won't push back on your opinion on that, and I will just say let's move it forward.
Realistically, at the end of the day, it's the select board's decision anyway.
That's right.
Absolutely.
We're going to be recommending a few things that we prefer, we don't prefer. It will be 100% up to them.
Agreed.
Then the process, I assume, would be that they would advertise and say there are going to be X number of members for the PC, X number of members for the DRB after January 1st. You can apply or whatever. So it's going to be like a clean slate restart. Another question is, currently on the zoning board, we have a person who is a member, who is a resident of the village, the city of Essex Junction. And we've had some discussion about that, and I guess wondering where that might stand there. If someone from, because there was some discussion, I think that talked to the lawyer, didn't we, Sharon, that it was not permitted to have someone who was not a resident to be on a board.
True, a state statute permits it, I think, as long as it's not a majority of members, perhaps.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
you know,
So
I think
when-
some towns have said you have to be a member.
There
of the
could be
town.
somebody waiting in the wings that just can't wait to get on.
And somebody else's.
Probably not, but you know,
towns.
anyway. So it is a state statute then?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we can be more restrictive, though, as a town, and say that we don't want anyone from outside.
And we've had at least 2 people serve on the planning commission who were from other towns. One was here originally and then moved,
Right.
but
Stayed
stayed
on
on,
the board.
stayed on, and the other one resides in the village technically. Business is in the town, but his home is in the village.
All right, so I already think we talked about the rules of procedure. This would need to be done. I suggest, do some work ahead of time, but suggest that it be adopted at the first meeting, or at least mostly discussed and then adopted sooner. That there would be some sort of meeting interested person's script for the DRB. And I think regular refreshers in the process for both boards. I know we do an onboarding for new board members, but maybe an annual, little refresher about, I sent you a big long email.
You did?
I did. Should be, just a regular refresher of workshop. Yeah, of how things are done. And they'd be 2 separate because DRB and planning will be very different. So there'll be different topics. It's general interested persons and conflict of interest, that kind of stuff. But yeah, so just, I think that was one of the recommendations from the Charlotte planner, that he saw that as being really important and very helpful for his board members. Zoning amendment need to happen on the sooner side. I'd say, process should be at least happening by the summer. But if we don't amend them by January 1st, it's okay. It is a busy time for the select board around then with budget season, so I don't know what their availability would be for public hearings, but it's a question for them as well if they feel like they could squeeze that in. Let's have it ready by January 1st. But
Not changing that dramatically. It would be nice to start a new process.
it would. It would. But if we can't,
If you can't, you can't.
it's okay as far as the procedure goes from like the attorneys. So then development applications again need to be wrapped up whatever phase they're in, which may mean extra meetings at the end of the year, may mean bumping applicants until January 1st. So that's my recommendation.
Am I clear in my understanding? Preliminary I, mine would I, if it gets approved preliminary, go to the DRB final.
Right. Yes, thank you everybody for the discussion. I know there's some differing opinions, so I don't think we necessarily have everybody on the same page to go to the select board on the 18th. So maybe we need some more time to think about it, or maybe we have just some broader, like, here's what we agree on, here's where we're still kind of trying to think about, and see what the select board thinks. I don't know. What were you saying?
It would be nice to get a feeling from them, if we can, is how much of they looking for from us. As I said, they're making the decision. Are they looking for just some rough ideas? Are they looking for a more evolved plan?
Yes.
In which case, we've gotten granular.
Yeah, as much detail as we can give them, better. Especially if we feel like, well, I would say as current members, you know how this works better than they do. I think it's really smart to go in with as much information, as much direction as you can give. From my understanding, talking with Greg, that's completely acceptable, and they're not looking to recreate the wheel. It doesn't mean they'll agree with you on everything. They're wanting direction.
Yeah, they may have some ideas about how many members for each board.
Yep.
Already,
Yep.
that.
But if we come in and say we really think this
Yeah.
is the number and here's why, then we should do that.
Can I ask something really quick? I like the idea of a youth member. I think that's a neat idea that Colchester did that. I wonder if it's possible. I mean, who knows if I want to, but I do think planning tends to lean a little heavily on people who've been here a long time, and getting that input would be fantastic. I don't know if that.
I like that too. I think the school board has a youth
They have
member,
two, I
right?
think. Yeah.
Are they voting members?
No. Eyes.
Great.
Catherine, could we go back through your summary again and just look and now that we've
I was going to ask for the same thing.
now that we've gone back and forth over this, maybe we can go through with the idea from all of us saying,
A little more consensus.
right, what can we live with, or what do we feel needs to be different from what Catherine's proposing? Maybe we're there.
I don't know if there's a proposal, right? These were just discussion items as topics to be discussed upon by us. There's still some squishy information that we need to provide feedback, clarify.
Maybe we could ask Josh
And John.
Yeah.
Megan.
Yeah. I don't know. About the members, what people are, and the overlap, and the amount of meetings. I mean, those are the three big ones, right?
So, Josh, John, Trevor, any?
Trevor gets to go twice.
Yeah, well, I if I was asked, I'd do both boards, but I just want the clarification. If we're on the planning board now, the membership of the planning board is not going to change. It's going to just carry over with people who have and people who go through their terms. Is that right?
Need in my mind that you would start fresh on a board that isn't really changing. You know, some of what the planning commission does is changing, but the board itself shouldn't change. So
Well,
I don't see a reason to start over.
Yeah, no, that sounds reasonable. But the zoning board, the people on the zoning board, can they just sort of naturally flow into the new board, or they're going to have to apply?
Pretty sure the select board would have everybody apply new for the DB or the DRB.
But just as a procedure.
Because it's a new, that's what they have people do when there's an opening on a board. Essentially, this will have 5, 7 ever open spaces.
And then
They
whatever
might
happens
take
from,
it- sorry.
if you have so depending on what happens with the planning commission, if there are 3 members of the planning commission that applied for the DRB, then they wouldn't know about having to refill those positions until after the fact. So there would be a sequence of events here as far as the planning commission was concerned. They would
Right.
have to
Probably would be some new
potential refill the board or whatever, depending on what their final decision was about who goes where, whatever, depending on applications and so on. Yeah.
I think our recommendation in this room would be that there be preference given to existing board members who want to go on the DRB, whether it's the ZBA or PC members, that they would be considered over just anybody.
And at least for the rest of their term.
I
would
would
hope.
say, well, we haven't talked about terms. I think there'd be need to be staggered terms, and
Right,
so
right.
it would be,
Yeah.
could
Well,
be
that's what I'm
different.
saying. So if Trevor stayed on as a ZBA member, went to a year left,
Hmm.
and he would be the only one who wanted to do it would be difficult because now you're hiring 4 other people all the same.
Yeah, I think it'd have to be staggered terms.
It would
And
also
also,
have to
appointments
be a
generally
term.
happen in July 1st, not January 1st, so we've got that like half a year to consider. Sorry, were you?
Yeah, no, I was trying to jump in, my bad. But no, I was just saying I think it would have to be a new term entirely. If you're on the ZBA, that will no longer exist, right? And
Yes.
so like,
Absolutely.
when you go into the DRB, you're not finishing out your term of 1 year. You would take on the new term on the DRB for whatever time is stipulated. Yeah.
My mouth said DRB, ZBA, but I was really planning commission, not change. But yes, I totally. That means, well, anyhow.
Okay, so we were,
Anybody currently on the planning commission needs to apply to be on the DRB.
yes, if they want to go to the,
Yes.
yes. Yep, I'm sure that's how that will be. I mean, if you all have a different suggestion that you want to bring to the select board, but I don't think that they would have to say,
Entertain.
they would entertain it. It's a new board. Anytime there's a vacancy on a board, they don't just assume someone who's already on the board is going to stay. Everyone apply. So they're going to do that. Okay, so we were trying to listen to those online. So Trevor, did you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, how about Josh? Anything?
I tend to agree with the recommendations, the staff recommendations as listed, with the sort of caveat alongside Dusty that I'd like a 7-member board, but I'm sensitive to the fact that if we can't fill 7 people, then 5 and 2 alternates is probably the way to go. But yeah, I like the once a month for each board/commission until we otherwise decide something else is needed. So yeah, I'm in alignment with the staff recommendations is what I'd say.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I'd say I'm not, I don't have any passionate opinion either way. It's been interesting conversation for sure to listen to, but I have no objections to what staff is recommending.
Okay. So for the most part, I think, do you want me to pull up
Yes,
the
please.
thing like we said? So instead of me just summarizing without you looking. Trying to get it back. Okay, so first issue is membership. I think the question on that is that 5 members with 2 alternate members. We've heard maybe 7 with 2 alternate, maybe 1 alternate.
7 with 2 seems like a lot of positions to fill.
Be a lot.
You could do no alternates for the time being.
I would agree with that. I'm not really in favor of alternates. I think that's problematic.
So if you have 7, would 5 make a quorum?
4 make a
Four.
quorum.
Four.
Majority of the
Oh,
board.
okay, all right,
And-
so that would be more likely that you wouldn't need an alternate.
The reason we've had an alternate, we asked for an alternate with you and prior to you, is that we had a number of situations where we were actually down and we weren't able to have continuity. I mean, we were very close to being under 4, not a lot, but it was enough that we felt we needed an alternate.
We had a commissioner who did a sabbatical.
Yeah, that was the bigger, that was the real driver, is that we had somebody who stepped away for a year, and we had an alternate that could step in and fill their role for that year.
And then when he came back, it moved to the experience of John Alden as their then village version of things.
So there has been advantage, but in my earlier point, I think, is if we think 5 and 2 is doable, then why not just 7, and then just know that we might be operating, with fewer than 7
On a
communities.
regular basis.
I would agree with that. I would rather see 7 and no alternates rather than 5 and 2 alternates. On the zoning board, the only time we've had problems is when we haven't had a full board. We've had vacancies and nobody's applying.
Yep.
But whenever we've had a full board, we usually have pretty good attendance. It's rare that once in a while, one person might not be there, but generally we have good attendance. That's why I don't, and that may be different for the DRB, but I don't see the necessity for an alternate necessarily. I think it just complicates things. I can understand how you had the particular situations with the planning commission, maybe that was a need.
And maybe that could be written into the operating procedures, that if special circumstances present, an alternate could be requested.
Or maybe, some towns, it looks like they haven't filled their alternate positions, like they're maybe not actively pursuing it. That doesn't mean that it's not available to them. You just maybe don't have to fill your alternates. So you could still say 7, and then an alternate.
I would agree that we just eliminate alternate. It's either 5 or 7. If you're a member, great, you're a member. So you don't have to worry about attending when you're not expecting to attend. You're just knowing to attend as a full voting member.
And if we also recommend reviewing everything in a year,
Mm-hmm.
there's an opportunity to come back and review it with the select board. If we find that we would need an alternate at that point, we could always go back and ask for one.
That's
true.
Let's start
Plus,
planning.
I just wanted to be able to comment not as part of the public, because Dusty used to make me wait so long that I'd forget half of
It's his fault.
It's just,
Purely.
So you do, I
Can I
guess.
mention one thing? I think maybe it was Dusty, you mentioned before the problem it could be if you have just 5 members, but then 3 people could be a quorum, then you end up with 3 people trying to make a decision. It's a pretty small group. With 5 members and 2 alternates, you could have both the alternates called in with just one member. But now they're trying to make a decision with the three.
You can only have five. You can only have 5 seats.
Yeah.
But you're saying that the two, if you had 5 members
And you'd
and
have
2
to,
alternates, you could have.
but if the alternates weren't available, I'm just saying
No,
we
if the
can't.
alternates were available.
Well, then you've got 5 members on the. You've got 5 members on the seating.
I think what Kent is saying is if one regular member is available, the other 4 are not, the
And you have
2
2
alternates
alternates.
could be
That could be
called
a-
in
that
to
could be a
make
really
a
awkward
quorum of 3
decision.
members.
I just.
As opposed to having 7 regular full-time
Yeah.
members, you just need 4 people to show up. You know there are 4 people who are always there. It's to
It's
me that
cleaner.
seems like the easier and better approach.
Yeah, it does to
because
me too.
You could end up with a really awkward situation with 5 members and 2 alternates.
I wouldn't support 2 alternates, and I wouldn't necessarily. I would agree with just going with 7 and 7, clean recommendation, and then just if after a year we think there's a need to change that, we change it, and we could always address it if a special circumstance comes up.
Yep, I that's a good thing to remember. You know, this isn't. It's not locked in.
Right.
It can be
It's not.
changed.
Just try to make it as
Extreme
easy as
anytime.
possible.
Yeah, but saying particularly, all right, with
Like herding cats, huh?
1 year,
Yeah.
we will reevaluate. You could say that, but might not need to make any changes at that point.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we're okay with the meetings schedule, having the joint meetings, semi-annual joint meetings, meeting once a month for each of the boards, at least for the time being, but allowing flexibility if needed to add extra meetings.
And that would be something that could easily be captured in the operating procedures
Mhm.
that are going to be written at each, as if there's a need, just very, very clearly stating that, extra meetings
Could be
could be,
added on
could be added as needed.
And it often happened at the planning commission. On the fly.
I think there wasn't any concern about the staffing of the boards. And then rules of procedure, I think that seemed to make sense.
I haven't had a chance to, I'm glad you got these from these various towns. I haven't had a chance to look at them, obviously. But, and I'll say it right now, is I would like to see, and I'm not sure exactly how the language would be, how it would be structured, but this was a classic example of virtual meeting and bodies weren't there. We did not see people, okay? I understand the reason for having the virtual option. I think it's appropriate. Whoever is coming out of COVID. Sometimes I think it's an excuse. You cannot easily replace personal attendance. Communication. There's all kinds of studies on this and big numbers and so on. Much of communication is body language.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody is not even showing their face up there, or they're sticking up a picture of themselves, how do you know how do you know it's even them, for one thing? On the zoning board, we swear that people that testify have to swear an oath. That, to me, that's cumbersome when you're trying to, okay, we want somebody to swear an oath over the video. First, we've had them where it comes up and it says, this is Sue Brown. Well, it's Bob. That's on, hi, I'm Bob Brown. Well, wait a minute, it says Sue Brown, okay, because he's using her computer or whatever. Absolute identification is a little bit different. I'm not saying that this happens all the time, but to me, the whole virtual process needs some work within the procedures, and it's going to. As a matter of fact, the legislature, they're I believe in the judiciary committees, they're talking about making virtual attendance mandatory for all municipalities. That's a big problem for a lot of small towns because of the need to have the equipment and so on, and the lack of general communications, particularly in rural areas, for people to be able to actually get on a video and so on. So, but that's not an issue for us here. I think that within the town, you know, we have reasonable communication coverage and so on. And we have the equipment and so on. But the actual process for how someone is to participate in a quasi-judicial meeting, okay, where you're taking testimony, you're having somebody swear that they're telling the truth and the whole truth. Wait a minute. All I'm seeing is a picture, or I'm seeing nothing. I'm seeing somebody's name. I don't know.
I like your idea of that being able to be wrapped into the rules of procedure.
So somehow, and I'm not sure, you know, I don't, you know, we're not again, not reinventing the wheel. I'm sure other people, as a matter of fact, like I say, there's this discussion is going on in the Judiciary Committee now at the state. So there may be some input that has been received there that, you know, could flesh out what some of the issues are,
Yeah.
and how you can mitigate them. I'm not saying to get away with it, to do away with it. It just needs to be cleaned up a little bit.
And to your point, why reinvent the wheel if it's already been, if somebody already has a decent.
Yeah, I'm sure, you know, like I say, you know, there are few original thoughts in the world, okay? Somebody's, you know, figured this out,
Yep.
and maybe it's not perfect, but it's got to be better than what, hey, I'm sorry, with all due respect for those people that were just there, I wouldn't know Mr. Knox from, he could walk in the room now, I wouldn't even know him, okay? And so, anyway, that just, it's, I need some work.
Quick question, Sharon, because you've got the oldest institutional memory in here. There's always been a clause, anyways, in the meeting that members could phone in if they were remote. How was that, to your point, how were they verified that it was, you know, select board member X and, you know, planning commissioner Y? You know, did we ever do anything other than just verbally confirm that it was, you know?
Honestly, I think you recognize.
Okay. So we need positive identification, I think.
Well, yeah, and as a matter of fact, even, you know, with the video option, it also says if you're unable to do it, you can call in. So that is an option, okay? But again, you know, and again, reinventing the wheel, the judicial system does this now, where they're, you know, they're having someone, they're in prison and they're appearing before the judge and so on. You know, they have some processes there that they feel there's validation for what's going on. And I just think that we need to have that cleaned up a little bit better.
I've been a part of groups that have Zoom meeting norms, you know, so we're hybrid, so we have in person and the virtual, but there are norms about having your camera on, not multitasking, you know.
Being muted and that kind of thing.
Sort of the minimum requirement, because of oftentimes there are bandwidth issues and so forth.
Yeah,
But
oh, yeah.
At the very least,
Understood.
At the very least, we could potentially say if you're speaking, you're on camera. And if you're not on camera, you need to declare that you don't have a camera.
But being this a quasi-judicial board, you're making a ruling that's affecting somebody's life, somebody's process, okay? And if you're not getting the full input from everyone, you're not seeing the body language of this person, okay? You're not hearing their moans and groans or whatever. You know, you're not getting the full picture. And there's another thing about, you know, having someone be present in front of their, what do I want to say, the person that is bringing judgment against them. If somebody is testifying against your proposal, and they're a blank screen on the TV, yeah, how would you feel about that? Wait, who's that? I don't know. You know, and he's giving it to me, and he's not. You know, I should be able to face my accuser. Okay, that's what courts are for. And I'm not saying we're this purest judicial process, but we are quasi-judicial.
Yep.
All right, Daniel, did you have your hand up? Are you all set?
I think I'm all set.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of this I think will be fleshed out later as we start to actually develop the new policies and procedures, I'm sure.
Okay, there were two other things. I just took this down, but I think we talked about amending the zoning regulations and realizing that development applications are going to be potentially in midstream, and how we're going to.
Do those applicants know currently and the ones that are coming in now that this is an issue?
No.
Let's.
Well, maybe they do, but we haven't talked about it. So I think, yeah, that's a good idea on the staff end to make sure that that's, you know,
Right.
how-
The only one really of concern right now is Pinewood.
right. But we don't know what else is going to be coming in
Right,
through
and
the
when
year.
they come in, right, as, we don't know.
Well,
So as they
yeah, I
come
mean,
in,
even
let them
just getting some kind of paper ready to hand people with an
Most people, we usually know, most of the time they send emails and communication, so we know something's gonna be coming in the door.
Right. Or they'll have a pre-application meeting with us
Right.
or something, so.
So that definitely will be part of our report, so they're aware.
Catherine, are you looking to have potentially, if this was a draft that we all more or less agreed on, without getting into the fine details of the operating procedures and so forth, is this the sort of thing that you were looking to potentially present to the select board soon?
On
Like-
the 18th of March is what Greg was
Soon.
hoping, that is soon.
That is soon.
So I think if we miss that, then based on everything else that we've been talking about tonight, we're gonna run out of time very quickly.
Yeah.
Following this with the next I mean, I would hope that maybe we could include in that some a notation that we would like to do a second draft of this for them. If they agree with this basic one, then we'd like to do a second draft with a deeper dive into some of the things like the operating procedures and
Yeah,
so forth.
I think that's a great idea.
And that way we're on their radar. We can get them to commit to whether or not they support the directions that we're laying out. And we can fine tune the points that we did have, still need to discussion. Still have a need for discussion of.
I think that makes sense. It's almost, we've spent a good amount of time talking about this tonight. We're all pretty much, we've got little differing opinions, but generally on the same page. I think that's what we need to present. If we spend a lot more time and the select board is like, no, it's almost a waste of time
Right.
at this point. So I think let's go forward with what we discussed tonight and go from there.
And we don't have time to wait.
Yeah, yeah, it's
With all
gonna,
the stuff
it's
that
gonna
needs to
come
be done.
fast.
July would have been better. It's January.
So do you need anything else from the ZBA or the PC to support that?
No, I'm
You
not
want a cheering
expecting
section?
like a,
You want us to, you want us to fill the room and?
yes, that would be great.
Do a little dance.
Okay, let's see it.
Let's see the dance.
No, I think I can be the one to present, but if you all want to come or provide any sort of support in any way, that would be great.
This is to the select
Select
board.
board on the 18th.
And this I think for all of us who have more thoughts about this has got to be just a draft one.
Yeah.
This is an
Oh, yeah.
outline of what we think.
Yeah, it's recognized, as we've said several times, that, things can change and things can be changed easily. It's not, you have
Right.
numbers of meetings, numbers of members, all that stuff is flexible.
Yeah, that's a great thing to remember.
And procedures. I mean, we're always tweaking our operating procedures a little bit. So just, life is a moving target.
How would you like to move forward, Catherine? Is a version 2.0 of the PowerPoint with some of those updates appropriate to send to members and we say, okay, this looks good to us? Or do we want to schedule another meeting?
I mean, we can't really be making decisions outside of the meeting. But what I could send is an updated PowerPoint, and this is what I think I heard. And if I hear disagreement, send it just to me though, not to the group.
Not reply all.
And then, so if I feel like that's the case, then we can revisit if we need to
Yeah.
in a meeting.
It also might be if you hear that there's differences on a point, that might be valuable to include in the presentation to the select board, that
Yeah.
this is an example of where we feel we need to keep drilling because we've got multiple opinions on this one point. I think there'd be value for them to see that as well.
Definitely.
Yep, good point.
I think 4 out of 5 of the items were agreed upon and look good for everybody that was here, my understanding, or that's what I absorbed anyway. And so we can just highlight those as green, all of the others highlight as red to be further discussed or more information forthcoming.
More thought required.
More thought. Great.
Sounds good to me.
We had a good enough point to conclude.
Yes. Workshop concluded.
Workshop concluded, so PC's back on. PC members, we have no other business at this stage, so I'm assuming.
I moved.
You're not a voting member, sorry, Parla. The balance shifted when Daniel showed up.
Oh, okay.
Workshop is done at this point. We'll figure out more how to do this going forward, because we also have, you have Ken's comments that you can look at. So
Is his hand up?
So Ken, the workshop is done. Is it related to that?
No, it's for the future.
Okay.
You have a zoning board quorum here tonight, and their participation, their meeting, which is what this is, was not warned. So just for the future, just keep in mind.
It was, Ken. It was. It was warned. It was warned as a combined zoning and PC meeting.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you,
Thank you, Catherine.
Ken. Thanks.
And Catherine. Motion. We'll move to adjourn the PC, and then we never formally opened the ZBA meeting.
Yeah,
Technically,
difficult.
it
There's only
wasn't a
two of
ZBA
us.
meeting, so it was nothing to motion to open.
Move to adjourn by somebody.
I move we adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor for the PC. All those in favor of adjourning.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Right.